Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with me today. Yesterday we met in Gordon Heights early in the morning, and I introduced you to our victim, whose name I used because the family said we could, because they wanted us to do everything we could to arrest the perpetrators that shot and killed their 17-year-old son. Tiger was murdered on Monday evening at about 9:40 p.m. when he went on Dudley Street to the Gordon Heights Park, ostensibly to sell marijuana to some people. He was driving his 2017 maroon Chevy Silverado. He had a 19-year-old young lady with him. And, you know, it's been reported in several of the social medias, oh, she was involved, she was involved. No, she was not involved at all, except that she was a victim. She went with him. He was there to sell marijuana when what it's reported to be at this point in the investigation now, four black males, approached the vehicle. They pulled both doors open, the front passenger, the front driver, and immediately started shooting. It was horrible. It was a setup. It was an ambush. Of course, the suspects fled on foot from the scene. We were notified and we started our investigation. I think I've told you before, and I'll tell you again, our homicide team is simply the very best. In fact, in almost 13 years, we've only had 2 unsolved homicides, and this is now not one of the 2. We were able to make an arrest. Our homicide team developed information, and in less than 10 hours was knocking on the suspect's front door. The suspect lived with his grandmother and his father. One of our suspects is Javon Berrien Jr. We told you that we suspected that they were teenagers or very young adults, and sure enough, Javon is a Bartow High School student in 11th grade. And he was joined that night when they robbed by Margus Johnson. Margus Johnson is 16 years of age, and he's a Fort Meade High School 11th grader. He's a cousin to Javon, and they were together with at least 2 other people sitting around on the benches when Javon decided that, hey, we'd like some marijuana, but we don't want to pay for it. So they planned this grand scheme to get the marijuana dealer to come to them, and then they were going to rob him of his marijuana. And for whatever reason, they decided to shoot, and they shot several times into the vehicle. Margus tells us, I didn't have a firearm, I was just along for the robbery. Javon had a 9mm handgun. When we served a search warrant on his residence on Gauls Street, 2965 Gauls Street, we found a firearm, a 9mm Glock. We immediately took this over to the FDLE lab in Tampa to compare the firearm to the casings we'd recovered at the scene. FDLE immediately followed up, knowing the urgency of finding who these people were that would randomly shoot and kill a high school student. FDLE worked with such speed, words don't convey our appreciation. But they told us clearly, the gun that you took from Javon's house matches the ammunition that was expended at the scene. We know that Javon has a criminal history of robbery by sudden snatching, and on another occasion he was arrested for battery of his mother, who was trying to search his backpack when she suspected he had drugs in there. Javon and Margus both are charged as juveniles right now. But what they did is not a juvenile crime. It's an adult crime. It's cold-blooded, first-degree murder. And as a result of that, we are asking the state attorney, and it's his final decision. Our state attorney, Brian Haas, is simply the very best, but we're asking him if he will consider transferring them both to adult court. But the investigation's not over. We know there are at least 2 other suspects. And we ask the community to continue to help us. You have provided information to us. But we're not going to stop until we arrest all 4, at least, suspects who descended upon this truck to murder this 17-year-old George Jenkins High School student. We're not stopping. We're going to hold everyone accountable. And it's important that you help us. And think about this. We're offering $5,000 cash reward. And if you didn't shoot into that car, you were just part of the robbery. We want those who are responsible for the murder. They're the ones that we're really interested in. This is another picture of Javon, who's the taller of the 2, and Margus, his cousin. They say they are a member of a gang that hangs out in the east side of Bartow. Gall Street and Dudley are in Gordon Heights, which are located just north of the city of Bartow. However, they are self-proclaimed gang members. As you see, we've blurred out them shooting the gang signs because we don't want to mark it. But that wasn't the only arrest that day. Let me introduce you to Javon Berrien Sr., our murderer's father. He was really ugly and mouthy when we first got there. I don't know how he thought that was going to work for him, but obviously it didn't. We ended up charging him with possession of meth, possession of cannabis with intent to sell, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and possession of ammunition by a convicted felon. I would say that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Javon Sr. didn't want to cooperate, tried to protect his son. Well, I suggest to him, had he provided the appropriate role model when that young man was a small child, we may not be in the position we are today. He's also criminally charged, and there may be other charges forthcoming for him as the investigation's underway. Keep in mind, we are still in the infancy of this investigation. There's lots of information we need to have. There's all of the work up that we have to do with the science end of this investigation. But when you look from the 30,000-foot level, you've got a George Jenkins High School kid that was the victim of a robbery attempt and a cold-blooded first-degree murder by a Bartow High School kid and a Fort Meade High School kid. That's a scary thought. 16 and 17-year-old children, and that's what they are, children. And you want to ask Javon Berrien Sr., did it not occur to you that something's wrong when your 16-year-old kids got a firearm, got a handgun? And where did this handgun come from? It's not in the computer as stolen, which doesn't mean it's not stolen. We'll have to go back and trace it from its origins. But my suggestion is, at some point in time, this handgun was stolen and someone didn't have their serial numbers. So when they made the report, if in fact they made the report, then it didn't get entered into the computer for lack of the appropriate serial numbers. Well, let me tell folks, when you have guns and you possess guns and you like guns, you're responsible for them. Some way, somehow, this 16-year-old got a handgun illegally because he can't legally possess it. And I suggest it's probably stolen, and we can't confirm that yet. But he got this handgun and ultimately shot and killed a 17-year-old kid. That's unacceptable. I have one other event to talk to you about. Let me underscore before I close out that we still need information so that we can charge the rest of them. This investigation is just beginning. It's not just ending. It makes me angry. It makes me completely angry that we've got kids killing kids and kids shooting kids, and we've seen that 2 weeks in a row now. It makes me so angry I want to pluck my eyeballs out one at a time. But we're going to stop this, and we're going to hold people accountable. But parents, I need your help. Start being a parent. Start going into the room, looking into the backpacks, going into their social media, and know what they are doing. 16 and 17-year-old kids acting like this need parental oversight. When you don't provide parental oversight, then they do things that they think are cool that they watch in rap videos or gangster music. So anyway, I'm angry with that. Anyway, questions?
2 questions. Number 1, you said that the gun was found in Javon Jr.'s room. So does that mean that we know the piece of gun was tied to him by fingerprints or DNA or any of that stuff? And the second question is, they're alleging they're part of a gang. Do we know the name of the gang?
I know the name of the gang, but we're not going to share that because we don't mark it. I don't know how prolific and how many members the gang is at this time. We're checking into that. It's a relatively unknown name, so it's not like it's a big-time gang. The second, or the first question you asked, certainly we haven't completed the science yet. But, you know, it doesn't take a Rhodes Scholar to figure out that when you've got the same gun in the 16-year-old's room that was just used to kill the 17-year-old approximately 900 feet away, that it's probably he's the shooter. And we are developing other information, and obviously we have other information that we're not sharing with you now that convinces us that Javon Jr. is the shooter. Sure. One of the shooters, at least one of the shooters. We don't know, there might have been 4 shooters, but we're still working on those details, okay?
How concerned are you with the uptick in gang violence in Polk lately? I mean, we've seen quite a bit. It's kind of disturbing.
Well, it's really gone from 0, for the most part, to like 2 or 3 weeks in a row. So certainly we're concerned with it because we normally see virtually no gang issues at all. And in the last 3 weeks, we've had incidents 3 weeks in a row. But believe you me, and if you don't listen to me, that's your fault, but let me underscore something. We're going to be hanging all over these gangs like a cheap JCPenney suit. We're not going to accept this. They're going to jail. We're going to put them in jail. We're going to arrest them. But quite frankly, what we'd rather occur is parents first monitor and parent your children so that we don't have to get involved in it and use the authority written in law. If you monitor and supervise and parent your children at home, then we won't have to get involved and they won't have to have a criminal record. But we're not going to allow them to feast on each other with firearms. And that's what's happened the last 2 or 3 weeks.
I'm kind of struck by the fact that they intended to rob him and then, oops, you know, fire a gun because this boy is dead. Can you speak to that a little bit more? How?
Well, The information that we've developed at this point in the investigation is they never intended to buy the marijuana when they called them up. They are charged, among other things, with conspiracy to commit robbery. They intended to rob them of their dope the whole time. There was never any intention to buy the dope. And when they jerked the car door open and our victim saw that a firearm, and he said, "No, bro," or "Wait, bro," he tried to leave. And as he put the car in gear and tried to leave, that's when he was shot.
Did he know these guys?
We are still investigating to what extent he knew them. There was obviously a relationship there because he knew to show up from Lakeland or Auburndale. He lived in Auburndale. The 19-year-old actually lives in Lakeland, but they showed up from either Lakeland or Auburndale all the way over to Dudley Drive, which is north of Bartow in the unincorporated area, down a small winding neighborhood, quiet neighborhood road into a county park without any lights because they don't intend for it to be used after dark.
Are you concerned about the availability of guns throughout Polk County?
No, in fact, I encourage good people to own guns. I like that. Good people with guns is a good thing. What I encourage, though, is that they appropriately handle them and appropriately manage them, whether it's at home or in their vehicle, so that they cannot be easily stolen. So you'll never see me anything other than a proponent of the Second Amendment and for guns. But quite frankly, people steal things and do bad things with them. I don't know for sure this gun's stolen yet, but you know that the 16-year-old can't legally possess it. His dad can't legally possess it, and his dad had a .40 caliber in his room, and the son had a 9mm in his room, and they didn't just get those legally. So I am not concerned with anything other than good people don't own enough guns.
One more question.
Yes, sir.
Are you concerned about the safety around that particular public park?
No, that community and that park is historically very, very safe. Very safe. We have very little problem in that community. It is a quiet community. It's a safe community, wonderful people, and it is a really cool little park. And historically, you know, we'll get a loud disturbance in the park every now and then. Well, all parks where people are gathering up having a good time have loud disturbances. But this is anything but a loud, raucous neighborhood or area. It's just not. And I think that's part of the shock factor for the community, is because it is such a wonderful community.
Sheriff, would you say the residents of Polk County need to be a little concerned or worried about these gangs becoming more and more violent?
Oh no, this is targeted conflict between gang members for the most part. Keep in mind, our 17-year-old victim, you know, it breaks my heart that Tiger is a victim and that he was murdered, but if he hadn't have been there selling marijuana, he wouldn't have been shot and killed. That's the bottom line. The gang members we talk about the last couple of weeks, they were feuding back and forth. They're not intentionally involved in other people's lives. But that doesn't mean that there's not collateral damage when they drive down the road and shoot at each other. But make no mistake about it. This is an upcrop that we have not seen in this community in these numbers, where it's this week, and now this week. We don't see that sort of thing. It is usually a very rare event, and it'll return to a very rare event. It's just how much legal pain that they suffer before they start to behave.
So Tiger wasn't part of the gang, just the...
Tiger was not part of the gang, but Tiger's father, I'm told, had a history of drug sales, and we in fact sent him to prison at some point in time. Well, you know, children emulate parents. So if Tiger grew up watching his dad sell drugs, Dad, you have some responsibility for your son shot and killed the other night. Drugs are dangerous. I am over hearing about this, quote, low-level, nonviolent drugs. Drugs are dangerous. So anybody that starts out a conversation about drugs are low-level and nonviolent would just gag me with a pitchfork. I can show you families wrecked over drugs, neighborhoods wrecked over drugs, kids killed over drugs, children and adults addicted and dying of overdoses of drugs on almost a daily basis. Now you extrapolate that all over this country. We got a problem. We all have a problem, not just the families that have the drug abuse going on in them, but it's all of our responsibility. Law enforcement can't fix this by themselves, but will not give up.